Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Es Una Final podcast. Today we are missing our host Mehedi, so it is just me, Charlie Tooley, and my special guest Michael, SF Analytics on Twitter. So today we're mainly going to be going through the biggest news in La Liga right now, which is Lionel Messi leaving Barcelona, which is just devastating, no matter who you support in the league, just because he's the greatest player of all time, and that's undeniable from just about any fan. Then we're going to be moving into a real special segment we've been planning where we're going to look through the majority of La Liga's teams, point out some positions where we think they need some reinforcement before the transfer window ends, and then go over some players that we think would fit those positions to benefit these teams. So with that, let's get into it. Michael, how are you doing today?
Good. Feels like we've been let loose. Mehdi's not going to be able to control us to how much we're talking. Not that he does to control us, but it's almost like we're going to record like a 2-hour episode about what what Elche need to do to win the league.
Yeah,
Let loose out of the house.
that'd take a lot of time. So obviously the biggest news, like I said, Lionel Messi is leaving Barcelona. What are your just initial thoughts on this, and how do you think it'll affect the league moving into this season, and maybe just in general moving on greater than this season? How is it going to affect the league in financial terms, in terms of play style, and Barcelona?
God, yeah, I think I haven't got any concrete thoughts on this. Just kind of an assimilation of like feelings, almost like it's just crazy the whole situation. Like how it's come this far after it looked like last summer he was definitely going, and then has a whole season where he kind of comes back on the side. They win the Copa del Rey, they nearly win the league, and the whole thing is just surreal when you're watching him crying his eyes out on the press conference, and the English translator can't even. Obviously, there's going to be issues with the translation. Like it's quite hard to translate a man who literally crying, but the translator almost being speechless is quite indicative of like just the whole thing. And I think it's really hard to address like how wide it's going to affect La Liga. But I guess you lose your face. It might take La Liga a few seasons to find a more collective face, but maybe that's better for the brand. Build around the teams rather than just build around one individual. But yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about how it might affect Barca, Charlie.
I mean, I just pulled a little bit right here. Last season, Messi scored 37.5% of their goals. He had 33%, 33.1% of their shots, 29.9% of their expected goals count, 17.6% of their assists, 18.8% of their expected assists, 17.3% of their shots that led direct or passes that led directly to a shot, 13.6% of their passes into the final third, which is a forward. That's just crazy. 26.3% of their passes into the penalty area, and 19% of their crosses. And we're not even getting into his ball carrying and his completed dribbles and anything like that. He is was the best player in the league last season, has been for a couple of years. He's by far the best player on Barcelona's team. He's carried them for the past 3 or 4 years since Xavi, Iniesta, all these great players have left. This is going to be monumental for him, and especially in a rebuild like we see Barcelona going through right now. Like they're bringing in young La Masia players like Pedri and Ansu Fati and potentially Elash Moriba. This is going to be super interesting how Ronald Koeman tries to figure out where he can replicate these massive numbers from, because you can't just lose the best player in the world from your team and then expect to rebound and be as good as you were. And no matter how many potential strikers you bring in, Memphis Depay, Sergio Aguero, I don't think they're going to be able to replicate even just his goal count, much less his creation, his passing, the amount of crosses he makes, and just the skill that he does it with. I mean, it's Lionel Messi. All the players gravitate towards him on the field. All the defenders they know we have to man mark Messi. So there are going to be so many consequences for both Barcelona and the teams playing Barcelona, and it's going to be incredibly, incredibly interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, for sure. Like on a basic point, like the Barca become like how do you rebuild their entire attacking pattern play and build up? Like, do you try and replicate a kind of ball dominant forward with Depay? Does he assume the Messi role? Do they try and obviously Depay's not as good as Messi, but do they try and do the same things of Depay where he's kind of the ball dominant force and he kind of floats around, or do they just completely abandon this idea that they should have a ball dominant forward? And does their goal scoring, their chance creation become a lot more collective? Do we start to see maybe more goals from midfield? Is De Jong maybe played a more advanced role? I really don't know. Is Griezmann into Depay the front two going into the 3-5-2? Like, it's just so many questions that a lot of which we can't really answer.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, the way Ronald Koeman is going to try and have to solve these problems is going to be incredibly interesting, because I think the only way that this could work is if we see the entire Barcelona team try to function more as a unit than what we have seen, because we've seen Messi put in 100% effort on every game, and he said to carry Barcelona. He's been raising the team's level for years. Now we have to see the rest of the team step up, kind of like what we've seen with Real Madrid without Cristiano Ronaldo in those first couple seasons without him. So we got to see how are they going to start putting in as many goals as they have, because for the past couple of years they've been far and away the top scorers of La Liga as a team, and that's mainly because of Lionel Messi's impact. So where are they going to try and replicate this from? Could we possibly see something like what we saw with Real Madrid back in 1920 or 1920, when they go to a full defensive unit and it's not go for, okay, we're just going to outscore our opponents, but maybe let's just try and restrict them, stop them from any chances, and see if we can just hit 1-0 wins, and maybe they'll move more towards set pieces. I don't know. This is just something we're going to have to wait and see. But I can tell you, I am damn excited for it, because this is going to be a totally new era in both La Liga and at Barcelona. And that's something that always excites me when we go into a season like this. Something big, some big changes going on, something new to watch for.
Yeah, definitely. I think I kind of put a post out the other day. It's just that this is going to be an incredibly competitive season. Like, as much as people want to think Atletico Madrid are favourites, I still think Barcelona, without Messi, has still got a really good squad. And I think they've just, it sounds bad that they've become a team more to watch without Messi, but like, just the whole challenge of how's Koeman going to fix this problem. It's just going to be interesting to watch. He might succeed. Maybe Messi was there's a kind of theory that he kind of held Barcelona back. Obviously, don't really buy it because he's just amazing. But this idea that the players pass to Messi when they're in better positions, or is that going to go now? Are we going to see the attacking talent unleashed? I just think there's just so many questions, but we'll have to revisit it at least halfway through the season, maybe not like a third way through the season. How did Barcelona change? So maybe there's a next pod idea or something down the line.
Absolutely. And I'm also very interested to see in the next couple of weeks what happens with Sergio Aguero, because he was told when he came into Barcelona that he would get to play with Lionel Messi. That was his main drawing point to come into the team. And now he's apparently potentially told the Barcelona board that he wants to leave because obviously his expectations were not fulfilled. So will he leave? I don't know who are the suitors for him at this point. Who wants this 30-plus-year-old striker who's obviously injury prone? And Barcelona are obviously going to demand some form of compensation for him. So I'm also really interested to see how that plays out. And I mean, I would absolutely rule out a return to Manchester City. But I mean, other than that, I don't know who else would take him at this point.
Yeah. I don't want to go on about Aguero too much, but I think like Aguero is quite a good example of, Barcelona haven't really changed. Like Laporta's come in, and the idea that they're going to suddenly kind of do new signings and it's going to be more progressive and smarter. They literally signed a 30-plus-year-old forward who's had injury problems the last 5 years because to keep Messi, like I just can't get over it. And then now Messi's gone, the whole plan for him is just backfired. Like, I think it just shows that Barcelona's problems really do run quite deep.
Yeah. Anything else to add to that?
I don't think so.
Final thoughts on Barcelona?
I guess we've just got to see how it goes, and we'll definitely revisit it once we see how Koeman lines up the team, I guess.
Yeah, and this will not be the last time we talk about Barcelona in this episode, because they're on the list of teams that we think need some reinforcement in some area. So now, we are going to shift over to that segment, but I want to preface all of this by saying that we're not going to be covering all 20 of La Liga's teams today. There are some teams, I believe it's 8, that we deemed that there are no areas where they need reinforcement. Villarreal was one of those teams. We just feel like, for example, they have coverage in just about every position, and they seem to be in a good spot going into the start of the season. Other teams like Real Madrid, we've decided that we know they're not going to spend any money in this offseason unless it's for Kylian Mbappe, of course. Another example, Alaves, we determined that they needed a right winger. That was our kind of spot that we thought they needed the most reinforcement going into this coming season. And they signed Facundo Palestri from Manchester United a couple days ago back on loan. So that's just an example of another. There are a couple teams that just brought in some players after we decided what position they needed reinforcement in. They brought someone in, so we're not going to talk about that. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael. He's going to be leading off with our first team. We're going to be going in alphabetical order. So first up is Atletico Madrid. Take it away.
I guess we're going to start with the champions. And the initial kind of thoughts was kind of the kind of a striker role, but then obviously the stuff about Rafa Mir is going to come out. So there's kind of like, we don't need to go over all ground. It's a good signing for 12 million euros. It makes sense. Even if he fails, they're going to make a profit. So what we're going to kind of focus here is a kind of Kieran Trippier backup, because to be honest, I'm not that happy with Santiago Arias and Simi Vishalko. Arias, I think, is a lot better than Vishalko, but I'm not sure if Vishalko is really up for the level anymore. I think there's a lot of doubts about his injury record, and kind of the same for Arias. And I just think that the three senior right backs Atleti do have, other than Ricard Sanchez, are all nearing or the wrong side of 30, and they kind of need a kind of younger understudy who might eventually replace Trippier. So kind of the ideal one I thought of was Nahid Hernandez, who of course had a really good Copa America for Uruguay and has been just really impressive for Cagliari in Serie A. And he's incredibly positionally versatile as well, so he can play as a wing back, as a full back, as a right midfielder. So he's someone you can imagine could shift from Simeone's 4-4-2 to the 3-5-2. He's just a very good aggressive defender, but the issue is that he's going to go to Inter Milan, it most seems like. So obviously that's not going to go through. So another person we found was Djibril Sidibe from Monaco, who of course didn't have a best spell at Everton, but he's had a pretty good season for Monaco. So he's played just over 2,000 minutes, just been a very good kind of ball progressive fullback, which is kind of what Trippier is. Like, there's not too much to Trippier. He's just very good with the ball and he's pretty solid defensively. So that's kind of what Sidibe is. But the issue there is that he's kind of 29. Does that really fix the issue that we're addressing? It's hard to say. So another one we've kind of looked at is kind of Paul Lirola, who used to be, who I think he started out at Espanyol's academy, then went to Juventus, didn't really quite work from there. So he's now at Fiorentina, but he's actually on loan at Marseille. And he's a 23-year-old Spaniard, so he kind of fits the kind of homegrown status to get Spanish players in, which kind of makes Champions League registration a lot easier for clubs like Atletico Madrid, who obviously have quite a large non-Spanish cohort. And he's just a good ball carrier and dribbler, and he's quite a good creative threat. And I think the thing about him being a good ball carrier is he's quite different to Trippier in the sense that a lot of Trippier's ball progression comes from his passing or his crossing, whereas Lirola comes from his ball carrying and his dribbling. So he might be a bit more of a kind of explosive threat to Trippier, maybe someone a bit more like Carrasco than Trippier. So that made quite an interesting dynamic, I think. So those are our suggestions. Like, please, obviously, do let us know what you think. And yeah,
I'm not going to interject there because that is your specialty. That is your team. You know what they need the most. And if you think Paul Riola is the best bet, I trust you there. Now we're going to move on. Yeah. Now we're going to move on to Barcelona next in the alphabetical list. And while we all think Barcelona do need a backup left back replacement long-term for Jordi Alba, we're not going to talk about this today because Jose Gaya is the obvious choice, as is Robin Gosens, but that's just way too obvious and way too easy for us to do. So we wanted to take a little bit of a challenge and look for a midfielder, for more of a box-to-box or attacking midfielder role. So, since we see Alex Mariba looks like he's probably going to be on his way out of Barcelona as his contract will be up, we want to look for someone who can rotate with Frankie de Jong and Pedri if necessary, because we don't want Pedri to be playing 38 matches this season. That's just too much for someone of his age or of any age. And also, he's very good, and I would like to have him sit out a little bit because we could use a Barcelona without him for a little bit. So my first pick was Cesc Fabregas. He played for Barcelona a while back, and I just feel like they're on the trend right now of bringing back old past talents. I feel like we could see a Pedro return as well at some point, just because, David Villa, not David Villa. That was just way wrong. I felt like he's still playing for NYC FC. That's not right, my bad. So yeah, Cesc Fabregas. He's at Monaco right now. He's not playing too much as he is on the wrong side of 35. So he's obviously this incredible passer of the ball, incredible technically. I feel like he would be good in Barcelona's lineup as someone who can play 10 or 15 matches a season or just coming off the bench late in matches to provide an extra creative threat, an extra progressive threat. And now we've seen with Barcelona having all of these now speedy young wingers. Ansu Fati, Memphis Depay isn't really a winger, but he likes to get on the ball in behind the opposition lines through balls, which says Fabregas could potentially do very well for them. So that is my pick. His contract will be up after this season, so he would come very cheap. And as he is quite old, I don't feel like he would fetch a price much over 3 million euros. So I feel like that would be the one course of action for Barcelona, just given their financial trouble at the moment and not being able to spend heavily in the transfer market. As we've seen, they're quite a bit in debt, so they do have to be mindful of how much they're spending and how much they're offering on contracts. So I know that Michael also said he had a couple picks as well for Barcelona that are probably a bit more realistic and nicer to Barcelona than what Cesc Fabregas would be, a bit more helpful in players who will play a bit more than he probably could. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, I think like you're right to stress the context there, Charlie. Like when you're looking at Barcelona, you can't just pick the best players because like they're just not in a financial state. So I've tried to. Well, the first one I picked was kind of Juan Jordan. That's kind of if money is no object, but it definitely is in Barcelona. So yeah, everyone knows how good he is. He's just a really good, solid central midfielder, and I think he could work quite well in a kind of rotation cycle, I guess, in a midfield three. The kind of more realistic pick, and maybe someone who, Barca fans might be underwhelmed by this pick. They might not be quite happy with the pick, but I think Yangel Herrera, of course, who had 2 seasons on loan at Granada from Man City, is a good pick. He's just finished his 2 seasons on loan. I don't think he's got a future at Man City, so maybe he might be on the cheap. I've seen a few articles suggesting around 20 to 15 million euros, which would be decent price. If he has 2 decent seasons, they're probably going to double that if they sold him. But my thinking here is that he could just kind of operate as a kind of a box-to-box midfielder who maybe offers a more direct goal threat than De Jong and Pedri, who are more likely to operate in the half spaces. I think that Herrera, there might be concerns about his ball progression, but I think a lot of them are dictated by the context. He played for Granada, a team that just didn't really dominate games, and he wasn't in a role where he was a ball progressor in the sense that he was dribbling and passing. His ball progression was a lot on kind of him receiving the ball high up the pitch, and I think it'd be quite interesting to see him for Barca. I don't think he'd start a lot. I think most of his minutes would be off the bench, trying to change games, but I think he could do just fine in that. And even if it doesn't work out well, if they say bought him for 12.5, 15 million euros, they could double that if he had 2 okay seasons. So I think it might be a bit more costly, but I feel like I'd be pretty happy with that if I was a Barca fan.
Yeah, I think even bringing him in on loan, if they split
Yeah.
the wages with Manchester City, I mean, that would be a great option for them. I mean, he's obviously very talented, and he could be a potential signing for Barcelona if he does well on loan. And I mean, we've seen how hopeless the Miralem Pjanic situation is. I mean, he's obviously a fantastic player, has been for years, but I mean, he just doesn't fit Koeman's system too well. So try and get some new blood in, try and get a change of the personnel. And I totally agree. Angel Herrera would be a great shout for Barcelona, especially just given his final third presence, his ball progression. I mean, he loves to shoot from 20, 30 yards out. I mean, that's just another source of potential goals for Barcelona. And I mean, it also totally affects how teams have to defend when you have someone shooting from range like that. So I mean, late on in matches, he could be a definite game changer. I absolutely agree with that. Any other thoughts on Barcelona?
None other than these, and none of these free signs are going to happen because they've got no money.
Absolutely. Yep. Just hypothetical. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So moving on. Next we have Real Betis, who aren't technically in alphabetical order, but I mean Betis comes after Barcelona. We're just going with that. It's the FB ref scale is what we're going on here.
Yeah. So the feeling with Real Betis was just kind of they've had a good season. They've had a really good season to finish 6th. Manuel Pellegrini's done an excellent job, but they've lost a key man in Isabandi to Villarreal and to a key rival as well. We should stress that, Villarreal just finished a space below Betis. I would probably say that Villarreal are probably the better team as a whole. So I think, Betis, they kind of need some defensive reinforcements in that regard. So I've kind of looked at kind of 2 options that I think could be pretty decent. for them. And I think Charlie has a third one, which might be a bit off to the left, but I quite like it as a shout, to be fair. So we'll see what you guys think. But firstly, I've got David Garcia of Osasuna. I think he's pretty good progressive passer of the ball. He's not exceptional, but neither was Mondi. Mondi was just a good ball-playing defender who was decent in defensive situations, and I think he's quite a proactive defender. He likes to defend on the front foot. He's quite a kind of, maybe this is dictated by Osasuna's style, but he kind of puts his body on the line, I guess you'd say. And he's just a kind of good player who I think could play at a high level than Osasuna. He's not going to beat the world, but he's just a good player. And I think add to that kind of similar regard, I think you've got Domingos Duarte at Granada, who maybe is a bit more of a kind of sitting off defender who could kind of be a covering presence, a bit more like Mondi. But I think, Duarte's had he's had one really good season at Granada. Then his second season was good, but not as good. But I think he's shown enough to suggest that he could play at a high level. And I think there would be too many obstacles in the deal because, while Seville and Granada are not next to each other, they're quite geographically close, I guess. So you wouldn't have to travel across Spain, which I guess you got to take into account. But I can't imagine Granada would let him go for cheap. That's my only worry. And I guess I'll let Charlie take his third pick.
Like Michael said, a bit out there, but my pick was Samuel Umtiti from Barcelona. Like we just said in the last section, they're in a financial crisis and they're looking to offload a bunch of players. Samuel Umtiti is one of them. So I feel like he would come at a relatively cheap price as Barcelona are looking to offload his wages. As we've seen, their wage structure is just a titch messed up. So I think they're trying to rectify that a bit. So when I was looking for a replacement for Isamendi, the thing that stood out to me the most was how good of a passer he was. I mean, he passed with a 92.1% completion rate last season, and Samuel Umtiti passed with a 95.7% completion rate. Granted, that was in Barcelona's system, where teams tend to lay off the Barcelona backline a little bit and not press them as high as they would other teams, just because of the system and how competent their forwards are on the ball. So you do have to put that into context a little bit. But Umtiti is a very high-quality player. He's struggled with injuries quite a bit the past couple of seasons, but at his best, he is a very, very good defender, and he's also quite good in possession. So I feel like this could be the second chance that he needs to get back on the world stage, and I feel like Real Betis could be the perfect fit for him. And we've seen them take on past Barcelona players before, not indirectly taking on like Marc Bartra as one of them. So I mean, this could definitely happen.
Yeah, I think you got to remember, like you said, like Barca, Umtiti is one of those players that Barca just want to get rid of. Like they've been wanting to get rid of him for so long. I feel like Betis could get a really cut price deal on him, and even if he was only there for a season and had say maybe one good season, if they sold him to England or Germany, they could get a good profit for that. So I quite like the pick. I guess we'll see what Betis fans think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they could even get like a Luis Suarez to Atletico Madrid type deal where it's under $2 million and they're just purely looking to offload his wages. So I mean, he can come in at a very, very cut price. Where like you said, sure, Betis could just turn him around after a season and sell him off back to Lyon or something like that and just turn an easy profit. I mean, this feels like a no-brainer, not just for Betis, but just about any under seventh place La Liga team. It just feels like he's such a competent defender, World Cup winner. I mean, I feel like this one is just an easy bet. It's not even gambling on him. It's just if he stays fit, that's it, and he'll be fine. So yeah, I feel like that is just it's such a steal at the price they're offering. Kind of get the same between Miro and Pjanic right now, but we're not going into that right now. But that's just that's what I feel like Barcelona's offering up right now by trying to offload all these players. So now we're going to move on to Celta Vigo, who we also thought they needed a center back. But unlike Real Betis, we thought they needed two center backs. Nestor Araujo is quite good, I will admit, despite being a U.S. men's national team fan and him being from Mexico. So there's a little bit of a butting heads rivalry there. But I will admit he's a great player, and he's just a great physical presence in the field. Tall, great out of the air, which is exactly what Celta need. So we thought we should look for someone who is competent on the ball and could do a bit of progressive passing and carrying the ball to the back. So our pick was Ruben Vezo from Levante. So he's now entering the prime of his career at 27 years old. So I thought he was ready to step up and at least compete for European football with Celta Vigo. With right now, they have such a great program going right now with Eduardo Cudet. And the way he plays is just such a fun style to watch. And I feel like one, players want to be there, and two, they are destined to start really hitting stride and will start competing for and hopefully in the Europa League relatively soon. So both Arujo and Ruben Veso are both, they're really solid on the ball. Both have around exactly the same pass completion rate with around 85%. They both also tend to handle ball progression out of the back for their respective teams at the moment, Celta Vigo and Levante. So I feel like they could both share that pretty well in this system and direct it out either way to the flanks. And Ruben Veso averages around 3.5 progressive passes per 90, and Arujo average around 2.67. So together, that works pretty well. And they're both averaging around 3.5 progressive carries out of the back per match. So I feel like this is a system they could both work pretty well together. They seem to work stylistically pretty well from what I've seen of both of them. And they're both also just great out of the air, which is something you want for any just center back pairing, where you think Celta are susceptible on the counter attack. So you want some center back pairing who can defend crosses quite well and balls coming out of the into the final third. So any other picks for that, Michael, or any thoughts on that?
No, I think I was saying to you this before, Shai. I think Ruben Vesso is just a really good pick, and I think he just directly lends himself to what Kudet wants from his centre backs. He wants them to be comfortable bringing the ball out of possession. He wants them to be comfortable carrying the ball, breaking the lines. And he wants centre backs to be aggressive. He wants them to be proactive rather than just passing it to the fullback and leaving it to them to do the ball progression. I think, I think it's just a really well balanced. It sounds like I'm just patting you on the back and just saying you've done such a million job. But
I appreciate it. I mean, you can keep going if you'd like. I mean,
I just think that when you're doing these sorts of hypothetical situations, you've got to think like, what does the team need? What suits their style? And I think Veso does kind of suit Celta's style, and that's all you can really ask for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the verticality and they're trying to play through the lines that Eduardo Cudet is going for with Celta. I mean, having center backs that can pass through the midfield into the forward line is so helpful. So I feel like this one is great. And Ruben Veso is coming into his prime at 27 years old. I mean, I feel like this one is just a good shout for all around. And I mean, I feel like he'd fetch a nice price for Levante, who seem to be going through a little bit of a financial problem on their own where they need to sell some players. So I feel like this one could be just fine for them. I mean, both sides will win if this transfer goes through, which I mean, it's not rumored at the moment, but I mean, potentially if it were to happen.
It will be.
We'll will it into existence.
Eduardo Cuda is listening. He's arranging the
God,
deal.
I wish.
He wants Ruben in Galicia. So where we go next, I think we're going down to Elche, the other side of the country. So I think the feeling here was that, Elche have had a good season, considering the circumstances they came into it. That they've not the worst attacking team, but in terms of if you look at all underlying numbers, they have the fewest shots, they have the fewest XG per 90, they have the fewest shots on target, they have the fewest opposition touches, and they have the fewest touches in the opposition's box, rather. And I think when you watch Elche, you just see Lucas Boy just stood there by himself, and to be fair, that's what's going on. They just tried to fend for their lives. So I think the feeling was here that we need to get some reinforcement almost. We need to get some kind of Primera standard forward. And the feeling here was, Sergi Enrich is a decent option. He only played 1,400 minutes for Eibar last season, but maybe maybe it's a better reflection to look at his other seasons. 11 goals, 6 assists in 2016-17, 7 goals, 4 assists in 2018-19. That's a pretty good return. For Eibar, who weren't in a similar situation to Elche, but they were in the sense that they're not dominating games. A lot of their goals are coming from counterattacks and set pieces. So I feel like he'd be someone who would suit Elche's style. He'd be quite good as a supporting player to Lucas Boy. I don't know what your thoughts are on Charlie.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I agree with everything you've said. I don't really have anything else to add to that. I mean, that just seems to hit the nail on the head. I mean, I don't have.
Yeah. I think the only issue is whether they could afford it. I think that Eibar have shown that they're willing to not have a squad regeneration, but they're willing to move on a few old faces after going down. And I think, a club like Elche should be looking at players who went down and thinking, who didn't play that many minutes, who's going to look to go? Because he is a La Liga Primera standard attacker, and that's what
Mhm.
Elche really do need because their squad. It sounds harsh, but this is no means criticism of them because it's not their fault that the circumstances they came up with. Their squad just doesn't have some of the quality it needs. So I think this kind of addresses that, and it kind of gives more support to Boy.
Yeah, and I
So
mean the only other thing I'd add is, I mean, Serge Henry played with Eibar last season, like you said. I mean, he's used to packing in and defending for
yeah,
90 minutes and trying to win something. Eibar weren't necessarily the biggest counterattack team, but I mean, trying to build out and scoring from just like a single chance in a match or scoring from a
yeah,
set piece or a corner. That's exactly what Elche need. They need to bring in these 1 or 2 goals per season on top of what they already are in just like in these big matches. They need someone who's a proven goal scorer, and I think Serge Enrique is that guy. I feel like this one, yeah, I don't know how likely they are to sign anyone, but if they are, I feel like this is the guy. I mean, it
yeah.
feels obvious. So, and some of these picks here on out will feel pretty obvious, but I mean that's because we think that that's the most realistic way to go. And I mean, it's just something that the team should do. I mean, just if we can see it, I mean, I believe they can as well.
Yeah, surely if we know if we think it's a good pick, surely the data analysts and the scouts at Elche are going to have some idea.
Yeah.
But I guess the next team we're going to is the Community of Madrid. We're going to go to Itafe, and I'll let Charlie take that away.
Yeah. So in the last one, we're going for the obvious pick. This one, we've gone far, far out there. Probably not likely whatsoever, but I mean, it just feel like it could come through. So we've got Romain de Castillo. So I'm not genuinely sure what style we're going to see Michel play with this Hetafe team, but I picked a winger. He's typically a right winger, Romain de Castillo, and I think he'd come in for quite cheap because he plays for Rennes in the League One in France. And he's not necessarily a starter. He's a come off the bench presence and try and be an impact sub. So I feel like he didn't play much in the past season. So I feel like he would come in quite on the cheap because he's not a key player for Rennes. So, and I don't think Getafe are planning on spending much. And I also feel like that they're not going to go and try and get out some superstar from one of these teams. They're going to go for someone who can put in the work on both offense and defense. And so yeah, someone who's not from a big name team or anything like that, something where they can get a workhorse who's willing to put in the effort and try and he's good at all the fundamentals. Like he didn't score any goals last season, but he was averaging 0.17 expected goals per 90, which is a high rate, but to not score from, I mean, to go for 0.17 expected goals per 90 and not score is pretty bad. But he also averaged 25.1 pressures per 90, which would have fit Bordelas' system perfectly. But I mean, I assume they're going to institute some sort of higher press with Michel's players at Getafe because that's just what they're used to. I think that that'd be the easiest fit for them. But he also had 0.31 expected assists and 0.69 expected or actual assists per 90. So he was assisting quite well there with Rennes. So I mean, he's proven to get the balls into the penalty area, to get the scores in good positions, which I feel like was a huge issue for Getafe last year. And now that they're going to be trusting Enes Unal as their starting striker, I feel like he's going to need all the help they can get. And someone who's proven getting the ball into these good key areas for strikers, that's what they need the most.
Yeah, I think without wanting to dwell on it too much, I think that this is someone who maybe is a more dynamic wide midfielder slash winger than some of the wide midfielders we have seen play for Getafe recently, such as Alan Neom. Like, I think it kind of makes sense that they would go for a more dynamic winger slash attacking midfielder under Mitchell, where they're going to try and dominate games more. They're going to try and create more chances than their opponents. So I think it kind of makes sense in that regard. He's had decent output, like you said. He said he played 500 minutes in 2020 to 2021 season, but he's had more minutes than other seasons. And I think the circumstances are there. He hasn't played a lot of minutes, isn't in the Rennes team. Maybe he could be a cut price deal with the League One. I don't want to overplay the Liga television deal because it has been kind of overplayed hysterically almost, where
Yeah.
everyone's thinking, oh, they're just going to go for dirt cheap, but the circumstances seem ripe for Hitafe to at least try something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like they need to reinforce that right wing because Takekubo will not be there this season on loan, or I don't believe so. I mean, he's still capable of that, but at this moment, they don't really have any creative wingers. And Michel, no matter what system he ends up playing, will want someone who can get the balls to the good areas and to make runs and things like that. Because Alan
Yeah.
Liam is not that guy.
He's Alan Leon's the type of, he's plenty of guys, but he's not that type of guy.
I'm genuinely surprised Bordeaux hasn't signed him for Valencia yet. I mean, I feel like there's
Well,
quite a bit of the old guard at Getafe that he could use. I mean, I feel
I
like he could
guess
just try and build Getafe part two.
yeah, I guess we'll get on to that
Yeah.
once we get to Valencia. But right now, we're going to go back down to Andalusia and to Granada. I guess I'll take this one away. The feeling here was that just, the Granada have lost Diego Martinez. They've got Roberto Moreno. I think they've lost Roberto Soldado,
Yep.
a big goal threat. Their main
Mhm.
striker, their starting striker. Let's not forget that he started most of the games, not Jorge Molina. Jorge
Mhm.
Molina mainly came off the bench. They've lost Yangel Herrera, who was quite a big goal threat for them. Coming into the box, arriving late, aerial threat, decent.
Yep.
The feeling here is just, do we trust Luis Suarez, not that one, to lead the line for Granada?
Yeah.
I don't think we do, and so I think
No, we do not.
Granada need kind of not more goals. Don't want to simplify it that much, but they need more of a presence in the attacking third. Even when they had Soldado and Molina for this first and second season, maybe Molina for the second one, but under Martinez, they still weren't really having much of a presence in the opposition's box. They were relying a lot on penalties, set pieces, the odd chance. So I think the idea here is maybe Moreno wants to have a more dominant system. We're going to try and get some strikers that might suit that. And the first one is Oscar Rodriguez from Sevilla, who, of course, he'd just be a loan. We don't think that Granada would have the money to poach him on a permanent. I don't think Sevilla would be interested unless a decent fee came in, maybe plus 10 million euros. But this makes sense for Oscar Rodriguez. He needs playing time to reaffirm his position, I guess. He only played around 500 minutes in 2021, the 2021 season. He's also a pretty good creative forward, so he would be able to create chances for himself while also laying off on a plate for others. He's played pretty well at this level before. 9 goals, 2 assists for Leganés when they got relegated 2 seasons ago. So that's one option. The other option is that we could look at Segunda. It kind of makes sense for Granada to look at sort of players from Segunda, some of the top performers, because that's kind of the market they should be looking at. Players who are doing well in smaller leagues. Obviously makes sense financially. So, we've got Đurđević from Sporting Gijón, who are going through a lot of financial problems. They're basically going to have to sell him. But Đurđević was one of Juka, as he's sometimes known, was basically one of the best forwards in Segunda. 21 goals, 22 goals, 1 assist. Made up around. He was involved around 60% of Sporting's goals, so a direct goal involvement, so a goal or assist, which is just mental. Obviously, that might not translate to Granada, but Sporting rarely dominated their games in Segunda. They were quite a counter-attacking direct team. They didn't really score a lot, so he kind of lends himself to Granada's system where Granada aren't going to go out and dominate, even though Robert Moreno might want to. So he seems like a good fit, and he's someone who maybe has more of a presence than, say, Luis Suarez or an aging Jorge Molina. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Charlie.
I absolutely agree with both your picks. I mean, I feel like even signing both of them together could be great. I mean, and I like Oscar Rodriguez.
I think they would complement each other as well, because without wanting to interrupt you, but I think Oscar Rodriguez is someone who maybe is more of a kind of creative forward than a direct goal threat. And I think Djukovic he averaged just over 2.5 shots per game, 2.7 shots, I think, per game in Segunda, which is a fair amount. That's a lot considering that Segunda isn't really kind of, maybe for lack of a better word, a shot-taking league. A lot of the games are kind of low shots, low scoring, minimal games. So for him to average that many shots just shows that he can get shots off. But yeah, like you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Đurđević would be fantastic. You hit everything on the head for him. I was going to say about the getting shots off in the Segunda. Took the words out of my mouth. Only thing for Oscar Rodriguez, just got a couple things. One, he's proven with a small level team, with like he did with Leganés, he got 9 goals and 2 assists in his lone stint with them. Obviously, they got relegated, but I mean, it was still quite a good campaign. He's fantastic from set pieces, which is something, as you said, that Granada are quite handedly using at this point. So, I mean, someone who can take corners, someone who's a wizard from free kicks, that's great. So I feel like those 2 points right there just lend himself as being a great option. And especially with Sevilla, um, just keep strengthening their midfield and their wide forward areas. I don't think he's going to get much time this season, so it would definitely be in his best interest to leave. So Granada, take note from those two because we feel like we're solving your problems here. I mean, the Roberto Moreno problem, that's totally different. Robert Moreno problem, not that one. We don't know about that. That's out of our reach at this point.
Well, Mehdi, of course, would disagree with us because he tried to tell us that Robert Moreno was going to be the dark horse. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can listen to Mehdi, but I'm sure Granada will do something.
Yes.
They got to, surely.
Have to, yeah.
I guess next we're jumping over to the Balearic in newly promoted Mallorca.
Yeah.
I guess you could take us away on this one, Charlie.
Yeah. So we spoke to some Mallorca fans, Alex from the Segunda Pod, mainly. He was a guy, big Mallorca fan. And he recommended us that they need a replacement for Ante Budimir, who was obviously fantastic for them and did quite well for Osasuna in La Liga at the end of, or the second half of this past season. They need someone for him because he was bringing the main goal scorer for them, and he's the one who kept them in it. It gave them at least a little bit of a chance last time they were in La Liga. Mm-hmm. It was his goals. So we kind of went all out here. Someone who, from the Segunda last season, who did quite well, but this is also someone who's young, has quite a bit of potential, and would probably cost a fair penny for Mallorca to bring in. But as he is young and has a lot of potential, this is a big investment and someone that could potentially help them stay in La Liga for many years to come. And that is Umar Sadiq from Almeria. And it's definitely a push, like we said. But as he's 24 years old and he's a proven goal scorer, he got 2.41 shots off in the Segunda Division last season, which you said is not a big shooting league. So that's massive. He had a 45.6% shot on target rate. So of the shots he's taking, he is scoring them quite well. And he scored, I believe it was 23 goals in the season last year, goals in the league last year, maybe 24. I'm not actually particularly too sure on that. But he also averaged just over 4 touches in the penalty area per 90, which is something that Mallorca will need this season because the final third presence is, like we said, the most massive thing you can have as a team coming up. And so just getting the balls into good areas. If they were to sign Umar Sadiq, they need someone who's going to get like 15 plus goals in the season to keep them in the league. That's kind of what you need from your striker as a team coming up. And we think that Umar Sadiq is that guy.
Yeah, I think there's nothing else I can really add to Umar Sadiq other than, he's just a really good forward who would add a lot to Mallorca. And he might cost a bit, but, Mallorca got, was it 8 billion euros or something from selling Budimir? Yep. Obviously, I know a lot of that went maybe into Pablo Maffeo or Carmen Costa from Villarreal, but, still some money to play with there. And I think maybe a more left field pick. But I think maybe this is a bit more of a kind of circumstantial pick where it kind of makes sense for the player and the club. Is Willian Jose from Real Sociedad. He's just come back from his loan at Wolves. Wasn't too spectacular, but this is still someone I believe that he's lost his place to Alexander Isak, of course, in L'Oreal's team. I think not any hope, but any significant hope of him getting back regular minutes for L'Oreal is kind of dwindled. So I think if he was to go on loan to Mallorca in a kind of low risk move just for a season, just to try and keep them up, maybe it would make sense. Obviously, I know he would add that kind of final third presence, pinning back defenders, a decent aerial for a good, strong striker. A bit like Sadiq and Budimir, but maybe not as mobile.
Yeah.
The only issue would be really wages, I think. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether Mallorca could really afford that, but just a pick, just an idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you do end up with Willian Jose, I mean, you are paying for someone who's proven in La Liga, which is just massive for a team coming up. You need someone who's been in the league, knows how to get the best out of defenses in that league, and Willian Jose could be that guy. I do not object to that pick whatsoever. It would be fantastic if they could get him. So moving on now, I think we're moving on to Rayo, correct? Which is a very interesting team here. I mean, we believe that they're looking for either central or holding midfielder to kind of play in a double pivot, someone to act as a destroyer almost, since Rayo do play quite a intense attacking brand of football, a counter-attacking style, and it's very easy for them to get caught out. We caught out like in when the final third, and teams can easily counterattack them. So we thought they need someone to kind of stipend those attacks, and Michael's going to take this one.
Yeah, so we kind of again looking at kind of newly relegated teams, I guess you put it. So we're looking at Real Valladolid's Ruben Alcaraz, who is someone who, is not anything special progressively. He wouldn't be taking on the burden of Real Vallecano's progressive. He wouldn't be progressing the ball for them. But he's someone who's quite a proactive defensive central midfielder. He's quite aerially dominant. He's just a very good. He's just a good player that you'd kind of want around. He's had 3 seasons now in the Liga, all for Real Valladolid. He played just over 2,000 minutes or around about that. So he's got the experience. He can add a lot to Real Vallecano in that regard, I guess. And, maybe the circumstances are there. Who knows if Real Valladolid are going to want to keep on a 30-year-old central midfielder if they're going to have a squad regeneration in Segunda. Maybe the conditions could be ripe for a nice little deal to Rayo. Of course, we don't know all about Rayo's finances, other than that they're not the richest club.
Yeah.
But maybe there could be something there. But yeah, I don't know if you have any more thoughts, Charlie, on this.
No, I don't believe so. I mean, Ruben Alcaraz, I feel like is a good pick for them. I mean, his defensive numbers were quite good last season without the lead. I mean, he had 23 pressures per 90, and most importantly, he had 10.1 pressures in his own defensive third, which is big for a team that I believe, when they're not counterattacking, will be pinned in their own half. So someone who is mobile in their own half defending would be big for Rayo this season. So I feel like he's just a good pick, and especially with him going down this season, I feel like he would be a good pickup coming in on the cheap.
Yeah, I think you've also got to remember, like you kind of implied there, Trey, like Rayo it's not going to be like the games they were in Segunda, where they're very much on the front foot, pressing teams, pushing them. They're going to be on the back foot, and they maybe kind of need someone who's not used to that, but someone who could thrive in that situation in Ruben Alcaraz, who, like you said, is pretty defensively astute and just solid overall.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So now we're going to move on to Sevilla, where we think Sevilla has a quite solid team at the moment, but we do think that they need some competition for Marcos Acuna at left back, because at the moment they don't really have anyone out there, and he didn't have the most solid of seasons last year. So we had a couple picks here. Our first pick is Reinildo Mandava from Lille. He won the League One championship last season playing left back. He was their starting player, so he's obviously got some top flight experience. And I believe he's on his contract will expire next season. So that's another point going towards him coming in on the cheap to Sevilla. He's not the most attacking-based fullback. He's quite solid defensively, which doesn't really align with what Sevilla tend to go with. But also, if you're looking for someone to be in competition, you might be looking for something a little bit different. Acuna might be your guy who you need in games where you're going to be attacking, going to the opposition, and Mandava could be someone who you come to when you're playing a team with a bit more of an offensive tactical strategy coming at you, like a Barcelona or something like that. Someone who will stay in your own half and just man mark forward, something like that. So he's fine offensively as well. He gets about 0.58 crosses off per 90, 0.62 passes that lead directly to shots, and about 0.05 expected assists. So it's not great, but he is a much more defensive player. He averaged 14.5 pressures and an absolutely insane 5.54 combined tackles and interceptions per match. He's very aggressive coming out and stepping to challenge players and step to intercept passes, which is something that Sevilla could really utilize, given that they do like to hit teams on the counter. He steps out, pressures, wins the ball back, and they could be on an attack. I believe that, Michael, you had someone as well in mind, another just different kind of profile from what Mandava would bring to Sevilla.
Yes, so it's also from Liga, but this time it's from Saint Etienne, and it's Peruvian left back Miguel Treco, who is maybe a bit more of a kind of dynamic option. I feel like he's quite like Navas in the sense that a lot of his players kind of very good creative numbers. He likes to he's very good at getting the ball in the box, whether that be from passes or just crosses. So maybe he'd be a bit more like Navas in the sense that he's getting to the byline and crossing, which kind of lends itself to Sevilla, really, because Acuna kind of crosses from deeper, doesn't he? Or at least he's a better dribbler than Navas, which I think maybe if you have Acuna and Draco, you have two good attacking fullbacks, but they're good at different things. So it's kind of like what we were talking about when we were talking about Trippier and Liberalola. You got a good progressive passer and a good progressive ball carrier. So I think that could be quite an interesting dynamic if Sevilla were to do that. In terms of the affordability, I don't have too much information, which is again is the issue. But Sevilla, have just got a cash boost from selling Brian Hill. If Koundé goes, is the money there? I guess we'll have to see. The only other option I would say was if Javi Galán didn't go to Celta, he would almost definitely be our pick for Sevilla, but
Absolutely.
circumstances.
Yeah. Also, just want to toss out there that we assume that Koundé will stay with Sevilla. That's why we didn't go for a center back replacement for him. Because with how close we are coming to the season, we don't think that Sevilla would be willing to sell, as they don't really have a set backup or someone in mind at the moment to sign in case Koundé does leave. So that's why we didn't pick a backup center back for them. So to move on to the final team, I believe, Valencia, which will be fun given that they've got a new manager and hopefully a new system. How'd you take this one?
Yeah, so Valencia need a lot, basically. I mean, they don't need a lot, but there's not issues. There is issues with the squad, basically, but we can't pick everything. So we've kind of tried to focus. Well, initially we had a centre back, but then they kind of bought Omar Alderete, I think, the Paraguayan centre back from Hertha Berlin, I think. He looks pretty solid, to be honest. I was going to do a profile on him earlier, but just didn't get the time. So he looks pretty solid as a good centre back partner for Gabriel Paulista. So what we kind of decided to look at was the depth in midfield. Rakic and Soler is a good duo to have in a kind of 4-4-2. But we think they just need a bit more kind of solidity, I guess. So naturally, with Bordalas being the manager, the pick is Aaron Barry, but we just don't think that that's realistic. Also, I'm quite keen on Moncayola from Osasuna, but the guy's just signed a 9-year deal or something ridiculous, so there's no hope.
Don't see it happening,
Yeah, there's just no hope. So to cut it short, we kind of picked on Jaime Suyane from Huesca, of course, another newly relegated side who, this is another guy who's a little bit like Aaron Barry, is he doesn't really offer too much progressively in terms of ball carrying or passing, but he's just a good defensive presence who offers a lot in terms of, he's quite a proactive defender. He's quite likes to be on the front foot. I feel like he would lend himself to Bordalas's style, which is, not a high press, but you want to be aggressive in your press. You want to try and win the ball back rather than just funneling people down the lines. And I think he's the kind of profile that Valencia should be going for. Like I said, Huesca, newly relegated, he's a above average performer for them. And he's only 24 years old. If he has 3 good seasons at Valencia, he could go for double the fee they get him for. That's when Valencia are in the situation they are in now, they should be looking at those sorts of deals and thinking, this is the guy we can get on the cheap.
Yep.
I don't know what your thoughts are on Charlie.
Just depends on what Peter Lim thinks. That's all. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that Soane kind of replicates the Arambari role that I believe Bordalas will be looking for in this Valencia team. Rakic could fill that role as well. But one thing we saw with Arambari last year, like you said, he doesn't get on the ball a ton making passes. He's not progressive, but he does get forward very well, taking a lot of shots. And that's something we've also seen with Jaime Soane. He gets 1.05 shots off per 90, which from playing in a box-to-box midfielder role, that's pretty good. Averaging more than a shot per match is good from that kind of role in midfield. And he also is high pressure, like something Bordalas would want. He averaged just over 23 pressures per match, which is fitting for what a midfielder in Getafe's team was averaging in the last couple seasons. And we do assume Bordalas will be playing the same kind of style. So he also averaged 0.83 interceptions per match, which is also akin to something we would have seen in Getafe's team. So if Bordalas does go for the same kind of tactical maneuvers that he did with Getafe, Jaime Soane is a great shot.
Yeah. Once again, patting ourselves on the back. As you can see, it's just all group think here. There's no challenging whatsoever.
Nope. Anyone can be doing this.
Yeah, we're just reading a script. That's all.
Yep. So that kind of concludes our picks. If there's anyone you dispute, please let us know. If there's any teams you would like to see, let us know and we can fill it in into the next podcast.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do want to let all of our Madrid Batar listeners know there probably will be a post-game podcast at some point in the next couple of days for Real Madrid's match against AC Milan today. Since Mehdi is out, we decided to postpone that a little bit, but that will be coming hopefully. So with that, thank you, Michael, for being on, and thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Asuna Final Pod. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Have a great rest
Thank
of
you.
your day.